Hello, fellow refiners. Tony here from Refinement, Not Retirement, the podcast where we encourage our listeners to focus on refining their lives instead of retiring from them. I'm once again joined today by my wife and refinement partner, Christine. How are you
Sounds good.
today?
Hello, refinement partner two.
Yeah, so we're in a good mood today. It's very cold in the Cotswolds. We're down to sort of zero temperature at the moment, but the sun is a little bit sort of shining here. But we're going to talk about something which is all over the news at the moment and is not a cheery story by any means. It's a story that has very much caught the nation's imagination, and it certainly caught our imagination as we think about the refinement, this most recent refinement stage of our lives. Of course, I'm talking about the post office scandal, which has affected hundreds and hundreds of people who thought they were making their own life refinement by becoming sub-postmasters all over the country, where many of them saw that as their retirement
Yeah, so I was just going to
fund.
say
Yeah,
that. I think it was that they all talked about, doing it for their pension and their retirement for later on in life, and thought they were doing,
yeah.
something which understandably would anybody would think, buying up the post offices, and or just working there, or just selling stamps. I heard one lady say,
Just
literally
selling stamps, and yet
stamps
she was sort of
from her front
accused of
room. Yes.
stealing, ridiculous amount of money that made no sense at all. Of course, this has been brought to light incredibly, really, by a TV drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. Why? I mean, it's made me really, really angry.
Yes,
Here
me too.
watching,
I
yeah, and I know
mean,
you
it
feel the
beggars
same way.
belief, doesn't it,
It
really? So,
absolutely does. That it took not just the actual scandal itself, which is of course horrendous, but the fact that it has taken all this time, because I mean, it goes back to what, 1990 something?
yeah,
Um,
five, I think, wasn't it?
I can't remember, but
Or
I mean,
99,
it's been
2015, yes.
a ridiculous length of time. The government has obviously known fully about this matter. Why does it take a TV drama to come on and for the nation to get really angry and write to their MPs and do petitions and all the rest of it before they do anything about something absolutely scandalous and horrendous, that what they've done to these people, many of whom have, well, not many of whom perhaps, but some of whom, which is terrible, have committed suicide. Others have died because of the length of time it's taken for them to get redress. And still, people are waiting for compensation. There is no excuse for that. And that bloody Sunak man comes on, comes on to the, what was it, Laura Kuenssberg's program on Sunday and gives these load of platitudes, and he feels dreadful about it. It's horrendous. Well, why the hell didn't he do something about it? He must have known about it for a
Well,
long,
they've
long
even known about
time.
it. They've even known about what I was actually very surprised at, and it came out yesterday. I was talking to a friend. Is that Tony Blair, Labour, signed off on the Horizon computer, the Fujitsu. He signed off on it because I was listening to a woman on the radio who's now 80 years of age. Her husband has died. He was at the beginning of Alzheimer's, and they thought that maybe he was making mistakes. He was she was asked if he was lucky enough to, be alive to hear that he had 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 it apologized to, and the blame was not his, because they did worry it was. But she said they were at the pilot scheme, and this pilot scheme was signed off by Tony Blair, even though they knew it was making mistakes and there was lots of errors occurring and it was not working correctly. And yet it carried on and on and on, even after the pilot scheme proved that it was not,
Well, it's
not sorting
worse.
out the problems.
It's the more I hear about it, the worse it gets, because that system, the Horizon system, as I understand it from what I've read in the media, that system was for something else. It wasn't for this. It wasn't for accounts for sub-postmasters. It was to
Oh, what was it
handle.
for?
It was to handle pension payments, um,
Oh
and
gosh.
or something, something along those lines. And it was scrapped. I think they spent about £700 million on it, and then it was scrapped because it was unreliable. And then so
Oh my goodness.
they decided to repurpose it for the so that these sub
Yes.
postmasters, most of them, they were handling their accounts manually perfectly fine,
Yeah, that's what
and
I've been hearing. They said they would
they
write it all down,
yeah,
20p for a stamp, 20p in, whatever it was, envelopes, ridiculous.
and then the post office it imposed this system on its sub postmasters. It
Gave
imposed
them
it. They
no
had to
choice,
do
didn't it?
it. And, as soon as that happened, the problems started happening. And, I say again, this software was known to be unreliable for a previous purpose. And for that reason, as I understand it, also, there were objections within the post office to repurposing it in this way, because they weren't, the executives there did not knew that it wasn't, it was far from perfect. So when you put it,
Why did they allow it to go
when you
ahead?
look at that, yeah, exactly. When you look against that backdrop, I mean, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I mean, we're not going to go in on this podcast episode into the details, because you can read that. It's all over. If you want to
Yeah.
find out the details of this, you'll have no problem. I would recommend The Guardian. The Guardian's coverage, I think, is the best that I've seen, apart from the actual Mr. Bates program, which is a phenomenal drama. If you haven't seen Mr. Bates versus the Post Office and the companion documentary, 1 hour documentary, 4 hour, the actual drama is I think 4 episodes. You please see that, because I don't really want to make you angry, dear listener, but it will make your blood boil if you don't, have a sort of, if you have not already watched it. It will do. It's certainly
Yeah,
done
but
that to
Tony,
me.
can you? Yeah, but Tony, can you seriously think there's nobody that hasn't listened to this or seen it
Yes,
or listened
I
to
think
it? I
so,
mean,
because
I
particularly
should think
young
we're talking
people,
to.
yeah, if you talk to young
Yes,
people, they won't have done, and they really
no,
need to.
that's a good point. They don't.
And
Yes, that's true.
because look, let me just put this in your mind, and you give me your reaction to this, okay? First of all, supposing this had happened to us, I mean, I'm just wondering how we would have reacted to this. Give me your thoughts on that.
Uh, well, I guess it would. I guess it's this age. This age,
Yes,
you're
I mean,
talking about the way we are now.
let's say our circumstances were different. We were thinking about, giving up our job, as we did a year
Yes,
ago,
yes,
right?
yes, I see.
Stopping
Yeah,
our business a year ago, and we thought, oh, let's go into a rural village in Wales, for instance.
yes,
We'll have your husband and wife sub postmaster little business, how, and we sign. Of course, this is one of my bugbears, is that
yeah. The
people are
shortfall.
presented with unfair contracts. I mean, this happens.
Yes.
This is not just the post office. This happens all the time. It's all full of one-sided small print, which I think is really horrendous. It happens so much in life. But this, of course, sort of everything else pales into in
Well,
slight
yes,
insignificance.
and I
But
guess
you're presented with a contract. You don't have any say, and you can't change the words or anything like that. You sign it. Now, what those contracts said was, if the computer system shows a shortfall, you are responsible
personally,
financially. Is
yeah.
what you have to pay for it. How can that be fair? Without
Well, it can't be, but when you signed it, I would think that what people, which is why they did, you can't even begin. You trust the big
yeah,
boys,
that's part of the
and that's
problem.
what the problem is. Is you think, well, they're probably only talking about a few pence, because these people are just you're just ordinary people like you and I, and you can't even begin to comprehend that anything would go that wrong to even think, there might be a shortfall of a couple of pounds or something, or you might have made an error, but that's what I think, because when you sign something like that, you don't ever dream that it's going to be, turn out the way it does. And I think, I think, as I've gotten older, I've become less stressed. Although, having said that, when I deal with some of these companies, and you tell me to calm down, I get wound up so much that I think probably I would probably become so stressed if this happened to us. I probably would have a heart attack, I think,
Well,
because I sometimes
just to
feel
quote,
so stressed by
I
it.
know that this is, and this is going to sound pathetic to the listeners, but by comparison to this, but I only do it by way of illustration of what is happening what happens in everyday life. I'll take you back to COVID times, and when we had a flight, we had two flights, business class flights booked, didn't we, with
Oh
British
yes,
Airways,
yes.
and they cost about roughly about £6,500. And British Airways was supposed to, because they cancelled the flight due to COVID, fine, no problem. But they were supposed to refund that money within 7 days.
Yes, and then let me just add in there. Then, when we heard that this flight was we were going in the April, if you remember, and this happened in the March, so 1 month before, and you were given to phone up the number, and in those days, they were not even there was not even a discussion about offering you a voucher, because this was early doors, as a lot of people say. Early days, there was no talk of vouchers. This materialized later on, during the COVID times. So I remember so clearly in London, making a call and thinking, oh, here we go. How long am I going to be sitting on this phone for? And I took the phone into my bathroom, and I remember I was cleaning my teeth, and I thought, well, I'll just clean my teeth and be on hold. I think I got through within about 7 minutes to a very nice woman who was actually in Italy. And I remember very clearly saying, you've cancelled our flight. Gave her the flight number, the details. Yes, she said, I see that. She said, I said, I'd like our money back, please. No problem. She replied, it'll be in your account by Friday. This was on the Monday, and I came off the phone. I don't know whether you remember. I said to you, "Wow, that was easy." That was. I'm pleasantly surprised, because you were starting to hear horror stories, and then you can continue what
Well,
happened next.
I don't want to sort of dominate the episode with this story, but in what they never gave us the money at that time, and it went on for months and months, and eventually I had to involve our MP in Kensington. I forget her name, but she did take the matter seriously, but couldn't get anywhere. They wouldn't, they wouldn't provide the refund. I took it up. I decided to issue a letter before action. But of course, I knew that if we instituted proceedings, it would have gone into a great big black hole. That was why I invented that's why I referred it to our MP, because I knew that we need because the court system, and that's something I'm coming on to now. But the court system obviously was essentially in a state of shutdown during COVID. So I knew it would take a long time to get anywhere, and it would be very time consuming. Ultimately, by threatening both the credit card company, which was American Express, through whom we paid it, and by simultaneously the British Airways with imminent legal proceedings, eventually we got the money back. But it was months and months and months and months. It was a tremendous struggle. There was no reason for it. I was dealing with some executive, female executive within high up within British Airways, and she was absolutely appalling. She actually reminds me of this Paula Venables. Her approach, just couldn't care less, and really,
Big
really,
company mentality,
yeah.
isn't it? It's
So
outrageous.
I call this corporate abuse, and we've encountered it. regularly. I mean, we used to act for big corporations, global corporations, and we came across it. In fact, we actually worked for the Royal Mail. I won't go into that now, but I can remember having to threaten them with legal proceedings because they wouldn't pay fees that were contractually due on time. And so this sort of reminds me of this whole sort of ethos around this corporate abuse, as I say, I call it. But what makes it worse, and it really comes out in this post office story, really, about how broken the justice system is. I mean,
Yes.
quite apart from the government not pulling its finger out and getting on with this, you've then got, I mean, there were lawyers involved. Lawyers are supposed to be officers of the court. That means that they have a duty to tell the truth, not to mislead courts. And there obviously was a lot of misleading, duff, faulty evidence, if not downright lies, involved in these cases. So there are lawyers involved, judges as well. I mean, okay, the judges are going to be able to say, well, I relied on the information that was given to me. But come on, you can ask a few questions. I mean, just simply a contract that says, well, if the computer system brings up a number, then that number is going to become a judgment against the defendant. That's not good enough. I mean, judges have to ask questions and require satisfactory evidence before they. I mean, they sent people to jail. People
A
went to
pregnant woman
jail. A
had a
pregnant
baby
woman
in
went to
there.
jail. What on earth is going on that judges are not asking the questions they should be asking, and that obviously there's the aspect of it that the post office is allowed to prosecute people without going via the Crown Prosecution Service. They, as I understand it again, they held on to exculpatory evidence which would have shown they withheld it. They withheld evidence that would have shown the flaws in the system, and sat back with folded arms while people went to jail, while people committed suicide. It's utterly awful. And as you see in the drama, I mean, just sending men in limousines to shut down people's livelihoods. Thank goodness for Mr. Bates. I forget what it's Alan Bates, is it? I forget his first name, but I think it's Alan Bates. The fact, thank goodness for him that somebody was prepared to stand up, or had the confidence, because why I asked you about how we would have reacted, because we have had, as I say, tiny compared to this, but we have had things happen in our lives where we have had to go to court because that was the only way we could get justice and fairness. But you can only really do that if you're in a financial, I mean, we didn't use law. We haven't used lawyers, because using lawyers is just, it's ridiculous, the amount of money
Well,
that
and
you pay.
this is what's happened to a lot
But
of people who have, had very good lawyers backing them, but the money that they owe
well,
is
this is what they, they haven't even
beggars
had their
belief.
legal fees covered, have they? And after
No,
all years and years and years, so
they could pay them interim
going to
payments while
lawyers
they're
for
settling it.
going to lawyers certainly for small things is completely out of the question. But what I was going to say was this: that it's one thing when you have sufficient financial, your position is sufficiently financially robust, which ours was, that you can afford to take your attention away from other things like your work in order to pursue these legal proceedings. But if you're not, and these people, you can see what happened, and people sort of blame some of them for assigning admissions, if saying that they did steal the money or that they did faulty accounting or whatever. They were coerced into making these settlements, and one can see why. What alternative did they have? They didn't want to
Just want
risk
it to
going to
end, don't
prison.
they?
They wanted to avoid prison. The word prison is a horrendous thing. The prospect of going to prison, horrendous thing. And they were faced with that real possibility. So you
But we're not.
can't blame
Yes,
them, can you, for signing
not at
settlements,
all.
signing admissions? You cannot blame them. But that was just so wrong. And we need to have a justice system which is fair and robust. And what our justice system essentially is based on is money. Who's got the power and the money? Well, obviously, there's no contest when you're dealing with a sub-postmaster on the one hand and the post office on the other, which is backed by the government, has unlimited funds at its disposal. We have to fix this. We have to
But
fix
I
this.
think I just think it goes further than that, because some of these people, we're talking, it wasn't small amounts in their eyes, but compared to some, some were talking 2,000, some were talking 20, remortgaging. But the bigger picture we have to always remember is that it's their children, their partners, their parents, their siblings. And I was listening to somebody this morning who was talking on Radio 5 about, he had a a baby sister who was barely 1 year old. He was 13. He had an 8-year-old sister. These people came to the door one morning and took their mother away, and then they heard that she'd been put in prison for 6 months, and they had their stepdad to look after them. She got out after 3 months, but had one of these anklet things put on. So for God's sake, what's this woman going to do with 3 small children? And they think she's going to do a runner, treated like some, I don't know, drug baron or some kind of murderer. I mean, it just completely got out of hand, and the lives that it's destroyed, not even just these individuals, it's the lives and the partners of the people whose husbands, wives that committed suicide, the people that have died since from maybe cancer that's caused through the disease of what they've had to live through, the mental strain, the anxiety.
The stories are
too
so
horrific. It's too horrific.
The stories are heartbreaking, and
it goes on
and again,
on.
It takes a TV drama to get the government to get off its arse and actually start doing something. And even now, or we think we're close to something. For God's sake, there's if this was in America, we wouldn't be talking about pathetic amounts of compensation that don't even cover legal costs. We'd be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars being awarded to an individual sub postmaster, not the whole lot.
Yes, exactly. Can I just tell you, there's a
individual.
breaking news coming in, so I'll break it now live.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is expected to face questions about the post office scandal during PMQs, which is starting now. He says, the minister, Kevin Hollinrate, told the BBC the government was very, very close to announcement on a solution for hundreds.
Yeah, very close.
But they're also saying they're going to bring in new primary legislation to make sure that those convicted as a result of the Horizon scandal are swiftly exonerated and compensated. Oh, and they're saying, this is ridiculous, we will introduce a new upfront payment of £75,000.
Oh, it's pathetic.
For the vital group of postmasters, Sunak says. We will make sure that the truth comes to light. Well, there was one guy this morning, he said that he was offered as a settlement 600,000. Well, that is what he's not agreeing to, that, because he said it's a lot.
It's pathetic.
It's a lot more than that, but they haven't even given him an interim payment of 600,000 until this is sorted out.
I don't know what
the 75,000.
I wrote to our MP up in Worcestershire here. I wrote to her and said, I'm never voting Conservative again. Never.
Well, we had some neighbours we were with a drink with the other night. She's been doing the same for months, and she said she will never vote Conservative.
No, I'm never ever going. And I've been a Conservative voter all my life, and I will never vote Conservative again. And Sunak's, I'm going to have to be careful not to say something really rude, but Sunak's response is he's the pathetic platitudes that he's giving out are just not anywhere near good enough. It took this petition for Paula Venables to give back her CBE. Well, that's the least of it. I mean, she needs to be prosecuted, in my opinion. Yeah. She needs to be prosecuted, and other executives at the post office need to be prosecuted, and also Fujitsu, the subcontractor that were responsible for the Horizon thing. I mean, there must have been evidence given that was defective or even perjurious. So
well, if if what they're saying is true, portrayed in that program, which apparently everybody seems to say that it was, didn't some gentleman, like a whistleblower, come into the meeting one day with Mr. Bates was holding, and said that they were controlling the
well,
figures.
they could get it was always
Could,
represented that nobody could change, nobody could get into the
yes,
individual accounts,
yeah.
and that was as it would appear, that was a lie. And that, I
So
mean, there's
yes,
so much of this is just so
well, it's fraudulent, isn't
horrendous.
it?
And
That's
I want
proven
this
that.
government, I can't wait for the general election. This government needs to be kicked out. And this is a very good example of just how appalling and useless they are. As you can tell, it's made me extremely angry. But the amounts of compensation, Chris, are absolutely pathetic.
Yes, they
I mean,
are
I
pathetic.
think I was discussing with you earlier today, the case in America of the two election workers, Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Shay Moss, who were wrongly accused of fiddling the election and,
By Rudy
manufacturing votes
Giuliani, wasn't it? Then
yes, yeah, by Rudy Giuliani.
yes,
Uh, uh, Fiddling the election in favor of Biden, sort of manufacturing votes or in some devious way, which is all proven to be completely false. Well, Rudy Giuliani, what do you think his compensation was? Not £75,000 or dollars or
well, he
100,000 or
wasn't getting the
200,000 or
compensation.
300,000 or 400,000 or 500,000. He has been ordered to pay $148.1 million to those two.
To those, yeah,
And I mean,
unbelievable.
and with all due respect to them, that is really nothing compared to what these sub-postmasters have been through. Really, it really
Yes,
isn't.
no, that's theirs. I would
It
agree.
really isn't. And we're talking here, he's talking about making an interim payment of £75,000. I mean, how far does that go on lawyers' fees? You know what lawyers'
Well,
fees are like. I
it's been
mean,
going on for 20 years. So, I mean,
it's
I can't even begin to
absolutely how
imagine what their
get into
fees
the,
are.
and he sits there on his bloody hundreds of millions himself. I mean, honestly, the government, somebody in government needs to get this matter by the scruff of the neck, exonerate all, and give them proper compensation that puts them back into the position they were.
Yeah.
And on top of that, gives them a payment for all the suffering that they've had to
And the
endure
homes that they've
and the
lost so they can buy a
reputations that
home.
they've lost. Not only the
Yes.
it's, for God's sake, get real, you know. And all this is, what I was going to say, ask you about in the very beginning when I was saying, how would we have reacted to this? Just think about this for a moment. Supposing it hadn't been whatever it was, 700,000 sub-postmasters. Supposing it had been one.
Yes. I
Is
wish
it
they were told
okay?
was just one.
Is it okay to do this to one just because there aren't hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other people? Of course it's not. Any more than it's okay to send an innocent person to the gallows for something that, for obviously a crime they didn't commit. It's the numbers shouldn't matter. It's justice that matters.
Well,
It's
they told
justice and
everybody they were
fairness
the
that
only one. So
matters.
in their eyes, they thought they were the only
Well,
one.
that was the
So
big
that's how
lie,
they got
wasn't it?
away with that. Was how
Big
they got away
lie.
with that, if you like, because they isolated them to thinking that it was only them, only them.
Well, these
And
people
until they
were
found out they weren't on their
these
own, it
people were
changed their
acting.
lives.
These people were acting in an overtly innocent way because they were phoning the helpline and trying to use this bloody stupid system. They were phoning the helpline and saying, "Help me! These figures don't make any sense. It says that there's a loss." Oh, well, you're the only one complaining. Nobody else is
Yes,
having a problem.
exactly.
That was
Yeah.
a huge lie.
Well,
And it
they
was
did it on purpose, didn't
repeated,
they, to isolate them?
repeated over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it there has to be proper accountability here Heads have to roll. People like Paula Venables, in my opinion, they need, forget about her CBE. She needs to pay millions of pounds, back. I think she was paid something like 4.5 million for her service to the
Well, it sounds as if
post
they're
office.
asking for about
She needs to
2.4
pay it
back from her
back.
now.
I mean,
Not quite sure why
and
it's not
other
the whole
people,
amount.
Fujitsu, I would have thought have need to make a financial payment somewhere here. I mean, what they did, I imagine. I mean, I don't know what their defenses are. I haven't heard anything. They don't seem to be coming out and saying anything in their own
No, they're
defense.
not yet, are they?
Any more than the post offices. They just go, "Oh, we're really sorry. We're really sorry." I mean, really sorry? You've ruined all these people's lives. People have committed suicide. People have died without even being exonerated. It's
Yeah.
it's just beyond the pale. And I hope that this, I really hope that the right thing is being done, and forget all this bloody stupid nonsense about £75,000 payments. They've got to be paid a proper amount of money.
Yeah.
So that's my view. Anyway,
That's
any final?
no,
Had a
no.
bit
I
of a
think
rant.
yes, yeah. Well, that's what I. Yes, I mean, as I said, you said we were, in a great mood this morning. The trouble is, talking about this makes everybody in a very bad mood, and it's not.
Well, we have
It's
to get
not going
angry.
away tomorrow, but we have to talk about these things.
Yeah.
We have to face up to them. We can't be like they are and bury their heads in the sand. It's a fact. It's happened. It's happening. It's continuing. And until this story ends, it's going to be still many, many years, I would say.
Yeah. Well, that said, we'd like to hear from you, dear listeners, what your views are on this. I'm pretty sure I know already what they are.
Yeah,
But
I think so.
I haven't heard a single word say anything. On if there is another side. I don't think there is another side here.
No.
I really don't think so. I don't see it. If you see something, please tell us. If we're being unfair to the government, or if we're being unfair to the post office or Paula Venables or in any of this. But I don't think so.
Yeah, bring
But
it on.
we would love to hear your opinions. We have a Facebook page for the podcast called the same name, Refinement, Not Retirement. You find that easily on Facebook. And we always like to receive your messages. But with all that said, have a good day. And it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye,
Two very
everyone.
angry cows.
Yes, two very. Goodbye,
Okay.
guys. Bye for now.
Yeah, take care. Bye. Bye.